WNST, House in Baltimore. Sort of gone through a bunch of guests that I missed on the go-round, and this guy is one of those guys. We tried to grab him the week that the Ravens were playing the Raiders a couple of weeks ago. Didn't catch him, but I said, you know what? We're going to grab some guys on bye week and see what's going on. This guy was at Fox Sports for a long time now with Bang Sports out in the Bay Area, doing all things Warriors and Raiders and Niners and Giants and A's and Sharks and all that good stuff. Probably a little bit of Stanford in there as well. We welcome Dieter Kurtenbach back onto the program. He is D. Kurtenbach. That's Kurtenbach out on Twitter. What's going on, old friend? What's happening out there? You got a new gig. Let's start with that. And doing the Bay Area sports. My pal Matt Nahagian's out there running a radio station now. So everybody's moving to San Francisco. When can I join you for good wine and Mexican food?
Yeah, you gotta catch this wave, man. It's all happening out here on this coast. I know that you guys have your fun little culture over there on the East Coast, but the West Coast is where it's at. You gotta make the move. Go West, son.
I've heard that all my life, and I always go, but they always suck me back in and bring me back here. Where we've all watched a lot of mediocre football, haven't we? I mean, you're out in the Bay Area, and Jack Del Rio's a dear friend, and I sort of want better things to happen for them than where they've been this year, and certainly the 49ers are amongst the dregs. But I mean, the trading deadline passed last week. At least the 49ers won the trading deadline, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting times for Bay Area football, to be sure. I think everyone expected a lot more out of the Raiders, and perhaps that was foolhardy, given sort of the performance that they've had so far this season. And at the same time, they're right in the thick of it. I mean, people out in your neck of the woods saw this Raiders team, maybe not the full Raiders team. You got E.J. Manuel at quarterback, but that was actually one of their better performances this year, that loss to the Ravens. So that's kind of how it's been going for this team, which had more money placed on it to win the Super Bowl than any other team in the NFL, which just still baffles me. And, we all knew that the 49ers were going to stink. I don't know if we expected it to be this bad, but I have a hard time thinking that, like, an expansion team wouldn't have had a better roster going into this season than the 49ers did. This is just a couple of years of just incompetence coming to a head with a rock-bottom roster. But you can sort of see the direction. The arrow only has one direction to go, so there's reasons for positivity around there. Whereas, I guess you're positive about the Raiders right now, even though they're an underperforming team, because the rest of the AFC is just so mediocre.
Well, if you like the Raiders, you like the Ravens. They have identical records, and obviously the Ravens have the tiebreaker with them, have the tiebreaker with Miami, but do not have the tiebreaker with Jacksonville or with Tennessee, where, we've just looked horrific. But I look around and I say, especially in this AFC, somebody might get in at 8-8. I mean, certainly 9-7 is going to get you, at least some sort of consideration. And I don't know that many of these teams, I mean, I look at Buffalo, they look like they're going to lose the next 4 games in a row. They've already lost one now, and they shouldn't have lost last weekend to the Jets. I mean, the AFC's still sitting there, even for 4 and 5 football teams. Hey, the Ravens have the week off, Dieter. Next week, they get the backup quarterback in Green Bay. They get the backup quarterback from Houston. They're going to see Jacoby Brissett. They still have a game left with the Browns and the Bengals. This is an easy schedule the rest of the way, but I'm sure most of the other teams feel the same way.
Well, that's I think where the differentiating factor comes in. So the Raiders at 4 and 5, you would say, okay, well, they get their mojo back a little bit with that Sunday night win over the Dolphins. It's an ugly game, but they convince themselves that they can go and win on the road for the first time since week 1, and maybe there's some positivity, maybe there's some momentum. Well, they get the bye week now, and then they get to play New England, the Eagles, the Cowboys, and 3 division opponents. So they have a hellacious schedule down the stretch. So it's almost the flip side of Baltimore. At the same time, it's just so hard to handicap these teams right now because it's just Jekyll and Hyde week in and week out. I know that Ravens fans have had that. It's just that concern that they've been living that existence for a couple of years now, it seems, where they just don't know what they're going to get from their team at any juncture. I think that that's a lot of teams in the AFC, and the Raiders and the Ravens might actually exemplify it best. Just no one knows. They could look like a serious playoff contender one week and a team that should have a top 5 pick the next week. And it's just that big meaty middle, and I'm fascinated to see how it shakes out. But I would much rather be in the Ravens situation than the Raiders.
He is Dieter Kurtenbach. He is D. Kurtenbach out on Twitter. Long time with Fox Sports, now with Bang Sports out in the Bay Area. And you can follow along. The Daily Dieter is out there as well as he's, what an area to live in, right? Where you have all these sports, but you say the Bay Area for football. Boy, that feels like a closing window now, doesn't it, over in the East Bay with what's going on with the Raiders. I missed the trip a couple of weeks ago. We were sort of devastated after losing our cat. I lost my mom. We lost in Wembley, and I did not make the trip. And I might live to regret that because I might not see another football game in that place, as they start to try to break ground out in Las Vegas and whatnot. I mean, the Raiders are the weirdest of weird franchises in that they have an expiration date, right?
Yeah, at the same time, they're so weird that I don't know if that expiration date is really written down in pen. I mean, they just constantly seem to be erasing it and moving it forward. Now this GOP tax bill, which we can talk about that off air, it's putting some of these subsidies and the ridiculous amounts of public money that the state of Nevada and the city of Las Vegas gave to the Raiders is putting a lot of that in jeopardy. And so I ultimately do think that the Raiders are leaving. There's nothing for them to stay with in Oakland. Like, they're not getting a new stadium here. The only money, and they don't have any money to build their own place. So the only place that they're going to get a new stadium, which if you've been to the Coliseum before, it probably hasn't changed since the last time you were here, and that was about 1994 on. It hasn't changed.
I love that old dump. I love that. It's the only place left that's like Memorial Stadium in Baltimore. It's the last place I can go and taste and smell a little piece of my childhood.
Well, yeah. I mean, other than nostalgia, I'm not sure if the amenities are worth traveling for. At the same time, I mean, it's somewhat of a wholesome football experience in this corporate hellscape that we seem to live in. But I think that the Raiders are going to be heading over to one of those places at some juncture. But it just speaks to the general dysfunction and, lack of vision of this franchise that no one really knows when they're leaving. I don't think that the public backlash has really hit yet that they are leaving. I think everyone was so excited for this mediocre franchise, which just signified ineptitude for so long, to have a good year like they were supposed to have this year, that they sort of held back all the emotions of the team abandoning the city but staying at the same time, and then bringing in Marshawn Lynch, who's this Oakland icon and somebody that is almost like a mascot for the city. All of that, I think people have sort of held back and created a bit of cognitive dissonance over, we'll get angry about the Raiders later, but let's enjoy this now. If they lose to the Patriots in a couple of weeks, if it does turn into, a disappointment of a year, which it very well is teetering right on the edge of that right now, it could really fall apart and make the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Who knows how long they're here? They're supposed to only be here 2 more years, but who knows really? Could make it really awkward and painful. I mean, I think it already is awkward and painful, but it could really exacerbate a lot of those emotions. Strange time, man. I'm not I don't have a full grasp on it, and I'm living in the belly of the beast, so I can only imagine how weird it looks to the outside world.
And then you go across the parking lot, and how dare the Golden State Warriors lose 3 games in the first month of the season? How dare they?
Yeah, well, they're bored. I mean, there's just there's no other way to put it. I've seen the Warriors play practice lazy pickup basketball for 44 minutes and then just be like, oh, okay, we're going to lose, and then, run it for 4 minutes hard and win a game against pretty good competition. I mean, this team is so far and away more talented than any other team in the NBA, and they knew it. Like last year's playoff run where it took the Cavs hitting like 24 threes to beat them, and that was the only team that beat them once in the entire playoffs. It got a little bit to their head. They understand how far and away better they are than the rest of the NBA, so they just know, we're going to be playing in June. The season's starting early. Do we have to try? And I guess a little professional dignity kicked in here after that little 3-game.
Well, the whole season's such a slog, right, in the NBA. And,
totally.
It's very, very difficult to sit here and talk about the NBA or the NHL in early November with any sort of I don't know, enthusiasm or even clarity, above and beyond that in the NBA, the chalk always holds. That's just kind of the way the race is run, right?
I guess the real question is, when they lost 3 games, was anyone deeply concerned that this Golden State Warriors team wasn't going to make the playoffs or that they weren't going to be the 1 seed? Of course not. Like, everyone knows that, they could have started 20-20 and it wouldn't have mattered, because so long as they give their best effort on a night, there's not a team in the NBA that can beat them. And there's only maybe one other team. Well, there's literally no other teams that can say that. There's a couple other teams that might think that, but there's no other teams that can say it. So, yeah, it's just very strange, and especially with the earlier season. You get the short preseason. The Warriors went to China in the preseason, and that messes up your body clock. Yeah, I just flew back from Miami, and my body clock's messed up from a 3-hour time change. I can't imagine going to the other side of the world.
But think of what you were doing in Miami. NBA players weren't doing that in China.
Who knows, man? But I've seen some social media posts. I think they probably got after a little bit harder than me. But it's a weird, bizarre season with the season starting earlier, and I think so many people want to, there's such a phenomenon, a cultural and media phenomenon, that people want to ascribe meaning to sort of everything they do. And the sad reality is it just doesn't matter, because they're going to be in it when it's all said and done. They turned it on the last couple of games here, and it's very clear that they might not lose again. I mean, that's the reality of the situation.
Not this year anyway. Maybe not till 18. After the first of the year, they can lose again.
Yeah, it's like, okay, just, call me in April. Like, call me at the end of March and let me know if everybody's healthy and if they're trying. Because if that's the case, they're going to have 60-something wins. They're going to have the number 1 seed, and they're going to go into the playoffs, and we can discuss if any of the other teams have shown me anything that gives me the inclination or even just a hint that they can beat them in a 7-game series. But I'm starting to get the idea that, I'm not expecting that to be the case, but maybe we got a lot of time for somebody to develop. Just give me a little bit. Just give me a little bit to see if they can beat them in 7. But I think right now we kind of all know how this one goes. And flip it over into the Eastern Conference, I think the exact same thing is happening with the Cavs, and I think they have significantly more problems than the Warriors. But I don't think they're intimidated by anybody. Like, who's going to beat them in a 7-game series? I don't think it's going to be the Wizards, even though they sure seem to think so in that locker room.
Well, it's kind of a weird thing. Obviously, the injury the first night of the season. I don't think anybody takes Toronto seriously, or even Atlanta, who's gotten off to just a dreadful start, although they always seem to have some pedigree. And it's the teams like Detroit and Minnesota the first month of the season that want to feel good about themselves and feel like they're off to a different kind of a start. Cleveland and Golden State are just automatic pilot. Cleveland looks like they don't even want to show up yet. They look like they don't want to play until January 1st at this point.
Cleveland's thinking to itself, what do we need to win? I mean, the Warriors are looking at it, and they see Houston, they see San Antonio without Kawhi Leonard. They see all these other teams, and they're going, okay, what's the next best record going to be when it's all said and done in the Western Conference? 58, 59, 60 wins? There's kind of a big meaty middle there. The kind of second-tier players in the Western Conference. That 2 to 6 seed is probably going to be pretty close when it's all said and done. So the Warriors need like 61, 62, 63 wins. They went 67, 73, 67. They can sleepwalk to 60. And the Cavs are looking on the other side and going, what do we need, like 52? Like, who cares if our defense is terrible? We don't even – call me in March. They can get 52, no problem. How many times do they get to play the Bulls? Like, is Milwaukee really going to come out and, have 55 wins when it's all said and done? And beyond that, does LeBron even need home court advantage? Like, he might want to make it a little bit interesting by having to win some games on the road in this year's playoffs, because it's just so boring being so dominant over an entire conference for the vast majority of a decade. But that's where we're at. I think there's I have a very hard time believing that we're not going to have another Warriors-Cavs final, and I have a very hard time believing that the Cavs are any better than they were last year. And maybe that's the storyline that we keep an eye on, if the Cavs can somehow improve from last year's team. But this Warriors team has probably improved from last year's team. They seem sharper in a lot of different areas, and they're only going to sharpen that as the season goes along. So I guess call me in 2020 when this Warriors thing has to get blown up, because it's a juggernaut.
That's not good for the NBA, right? I mean, as much as the NFL wants a powerful team and they hate all this 4-5 and 5-4, and the Patriots are back to the pack, and I don't know that anybody really believes in the Eagles. And look at baseball this year with, the Astros winning. That's good for baseball. I think getting the Dodgers there was good for baseball. Having the Yankees inevitably not win is good for baseball. I think even the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Nationals having some semblance of turmoil with managers and such after winning 100 games or damn near it, that's probably good off-season fodder for the baseball hot stove machine, right?
Yeah, but you think, okay, yeah, baseball has it's a very competitive, it really challenges you intellectually. There's a bunch of different teams that see like right there, ready to make something happen, and it's the exact opposite in the NBA, but at the same time, the NBA is such a wonderfully created soap opera. And I would venture this. Was last year's playoffs more interesting than the playoffs the year before that, when the Warriors went in with 73 and everyone thought they would cakewalk through? Like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I do think that there's value in having, a juggernaut and a team that everyone expects is going to do it, because it makes it that much richer when something crazy does happen, and it's still sports. And you still have to play the games, and injuries happen, and bad power dynamics happen, and no one saw the Warriors coming in the first place. No one might, maybe the Bucks find a new gear. Maybe there's another team that rises into power without us really knowing, or without us seeing it coming. I don't know, but I do know that, having a team like an Alabama that's in it every single year, it makes it really fascinating when, maybe all giants must fall eventually. It makes it that much more interesting when everybody's going for sort of one main villain. Creates a much better narrative. And I think we've had 365 days of the NBA this year, I would argue, for the first time ever, because you have such a dominant force in the NBA. So I have a hard time saying it's not good for it, though it does make it a little less intriguing in the season, which I think the NBA isn't a fan of.
He is D. Kurtenbach. He's at Bang Sports out in the Bay Area. This segment brought to you by our friends at Compass Point Golf Course in Pasadena, the best place to play this fall and winter. They got events going on down there, delicious craft brews. They do night golf, always doing creative stuff down in Pasadena. A great course close to home. It is compasspointgolf.com. Don't forget to give the King a ring, lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. My pal Paul King and King Discount Liquors. Get over to Rosedale and give the King a ring. Dieter Kurtenbach can be followed at D. Kurtenbach. Now with Bang Sports, a columnist out there in the Bay Area and monitoring all things. And, football almost over in your place other than the Raiders. I mean, they're a week or two or a couple of losses away from going away. But in examining this year, I don't know that anybody's buying what the Eagles are selling or what the Rams are selling. But certainly this week, very, very hard to not take them seriously when the trend is now getting into, let's say, pumpkin pie and eggnog and Thanksgiving, and these teams are week after week putting up 50s and giving up teens.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it is fascinating to see the sort of the offensive evolutions of the NFL in general. I mean, it looks more like a spread concept that I saw a couple of years ago in college. Those are the norm of an NFL offense now, and it's such a pass-happy league. And you think about the Rams, and are they the real deal? I mean, this McVay guy, what a coach! I mean, the fact that he can take Jared Goff, who everyone was ready to write off as a bust last year, and turn him into an MVP candidate, and turn that Rams team, which he inherited some talent, no doubt, with Goten getting Wade Phillips, and just having them at the top of the NFC West. I'm still having a hard time believing it, but I've seen this team up close, and they're sound. They're talented. I don't know if they're an actual Super Bowl contender. They might need a little more seasoning for that, but this is a playoff team. There's no doubt in my mind. They look like a playoff team. There's just not a lot of those right now. I still am not buying the Eagles. Personally, I think Carson Wentz makes too many mistakes. And that defense, you losing your left tackle, losing your middle linebacker a couple of weeks back is that makes me a bit more concerned than even the pretty decent level of concern I already had for that team. But Yeah, it's funny. You look around, and the fact that the Raiders are still in it, the fact that, a team like the Ravens is still in it, you just have all these teams that are just sort of mediocre. Like, I don't know who's good in the NFL this year. Like, the Patriots, we would just say, like, well, the Patriots are good. Well, the Patriots defense kind of stinks. I know it's looking better, but, like, it kind of stinks. And, like, oh, well, we thought the Chiefs were good. They came out to a really great start. Well, they've now lost, 3 games. They don't look so good right now. And then I guess the Steelers are pretty good, but I'm having a hard time figuring out, like, who the best teams are. And I don't know if this parity thing is is all it's cracked up to be, because it's just kind of confusing.
Dieter Kurtenbach can be found at D. Kurtenbach. That's Kurtenbach. He's at Bang Sports doing the Bay Area. What's Bang Sports? It's fun to say. I know that.
Yeah, it's the Bay Area news group. So it's the San Jose Mercury News and the Oakland Tribune and the East Bay Times. They all got together and had to come up with a really fun acronym. So
well, I like that. I used to read the San Jose Mercury News many, many years ago when John Rawlings was the editor out there, and I used to beg him for a job back in 1987. So that's how old I am, Dieter. I'm going back. I have all my rejection letters, too. Every time I see Rawlings, I make sure I let him know. Any of those guys that ever rejected me back in the 80s. I don't get mad. I get radio is what I do. Hey, great to have you on, as always. And I'm sorry I missed you out there in the Bay Area, but there's always an excuse. High on a hill, it calls to me, as Tony Bennett once said. I'll be back, as Schwarzenegger once said.
For sure. Maybe we'll get a very disappointing playoff matchup between our respective regional teams in the first round, and we can all cry over the current state of the NFL together.
I don't think at this point there's any thought that you're coming here or we're going there.
I have no idea at this juncture, man. Anything can happen when you have so little dominance.
Dude, I am selling the fact that the Ravens are completely mediocre, if not times putrid, and never excellent, quite frankly. But I'm also selling the notion that, well, they have Green Bay's backup quarterback and Houston's backup quarterback. Yeah. And they've already lost to Minnesota's third-string quarterback, so anything's possible around here. We don't take anybody lightly around here. Great to have you on. Great to visit. I'm glad you're doing well out there at Bang Sports, the Bay Area news group out in the Bay Area. We'll see you soon, Dieter.
All right, thanks, man. Talk
you got it, man. Dieter Kurtenbach can be found at D. Kurtenbach on Twitter, as well as at Bang Sports on Twitter. You can find me out at the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That is free of charge and powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Reminder, CJ Mosley is going to be joining us next Tuesday night. We're going to be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry, doing some live radio. We'll have some more details on that a little later on in the week. We'll have it up on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. We also stream live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNST TV channel. If there's any big news this week, any breaking news at all, you're going to get that first on the WNST Tech Service. About 10,000 of you on it these days, all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday. He'll be driving you home. It is called the SSV. That's the Sunday Sports Voice. Now heard on Thursdays from 3 until 5 right here. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.